Wood graining as a painted finish. Wood graining is a really easy entree into painted finishes. It's probably one of the easiest and most effective painted finishes or things you can do with paint. So with wood graining, what we basically do is we lay down a colour, leave it to dry, and this is normally water-based acrylic, leave it to dry, and then over the top of that, as you can see I'm doing here, we apply a glaze. And while that glaze is wet, we take it back off with various different tools. So we can use wood graining rockers, or we can even use brushes, or as you'll see here in a sec, I use steel wool, a Scotch Brite, all sorts of things. But as I say, as the glaze is wet, you just take it back off again with one of these tools. Now the great thing is, if you're not happy with the result, or you want to have another go at it, or you just want to practice, as long as that glaze is still wet, you can actually go back over it and have another go. So the glaze is made up of spreader medium and various different colours. We're using the Derivan Students paints here, and burnt umber and a little bit of raw umber to give a sort of wood grain effect. You'll see I've used a Scotch Brite, steel wool, and now I'm going to use just a brush, everyday house painting brush. And keep in mind, you need to keep drying your tools, wiping the paint off the tools, so that whenever you present it to the glaze, they're fairly dry and you're not just painting. Now the next tool I'm going to have a go with is called a wood graining rocker, and it is really cool. It describes or lays down what you'd expect to see, sort of the heartwood of wood, and you can see how easy it is there. And all it is a rubber tool with concentric circles, or half circles actually, just carved into the rubber, and you just rock it backwards and forwards, presenting a different face to the glaze. As you do that, it's taking the paint off and you get this pattern. You can use some other tools there, combs, and a little later in the video we'll show you how to do an oak that has a combination of all these tools. The wood graining rocker, some combs, and also some softening brushes. So now we'll get a little bit more adventurous and do something akin to an inlaid wood, also known as intarsia. You just tape off the various different areas to give a different pattern, and then we'll do different types of wood. So here first I'm going to try and replicate something akin to pine wood. I'll use the wood graining rocker to just quickly whip down some grain there, and whilst it doesn't show it on the camera, it'll dry a bit lighter than that. That looks quite like a sort of standard pine that you'd see. Next, I'm going to cut out again for a sort of stencil effect, to then do mahogany. So with mahogany, all the colours that we use will be in the description below, but mahogany, once again, we'll lay down the base coat, which will be a different base coat to the pine wood, because obviously the different combinations of colours are what will actually dictate the type of wood that we get as a result. And so here I'm just mixing raw sienna and white together. It's a good idea to actually have a look at a picture of a real piece of wood that you're actually trying to copy, just so you can get the colours and the grain right. So now I've got my colour right, I'm going to lay it down, I've let it dry, and now I'm just using a brush to take the glaze off. Once again, I've left that dry, and now I want to do the whole background. I've used yellow oxide and raw sienna here, mixed together, and just putting that background on quite roughly, because, you know, wood is organic. You don't want it to be perfectly all the one colour all the way across. You want some variation. And the same as I've used mainly burnt umber with a bit of red oxide and a little bit of raw umber as well, just to give some variation of colour in there. Now, so that the glaze doesn't dry, I'm just going to do part of the glaze down the centre there while I use my wood graining rocker to get the heart grain in, which is fairly typical of oak. And then I'll use the edges of the rocker, which are made to do just that, show the straight grain, as it were. And then I'll come in with both a comb and a softening brush, which I'm using at the moment, just to blend and cross hatch across that grain. With the softening brush, it just takes some of those sharp edges off, so it isn't too obvious that they've been painted. It just blurs the lines a little bit, as you'd expect with the grain. And the same with cross hatching with the wood graining combs. You just knock a little bit of the edges of the paint off and get that more characteristic sort of cross grain in there. Just to finish off now, I'll put another little heart grain in, and then basically blend those two lots of heart grain together with another bit of grain down the center, using the tool, the straight comb, and then now just softening again using a flogger this time, just to give once again another characteristic sort of bleed or blend to the paint, as you'd expect to see in the oak. And here I'm just fixing up a little bit that I wasn't quite happy with, and you can do that with the tools once again while the glaze is still wet. And there we have it. Pull the tape off to reveal pine and mahogany on oak.